Hi, and I'm glad that you're watching AAU Talks on AAU TV. My name is Ajiman Otradako, and it's a very great time for us to learn on the essence of data-driven decision making. You know, we live in an era where data is actually the very most important resource because it helps us to deduce and induce, make proper decisions backed by fact and not just mere conjecture. And lots of developments have happened because they were data-driven and data-backed, and others went anyway because we didn't have enough data to back them. So today I'll be discussing this very important topic on data-driven decision making towards development, prosperity, and justice with our very own Dr. Walter Allen from the University of California. You know, you have to stay with your pens and papers to note down the very important fact that he will share with his years of experience in data analysis and how we can turn around data to make decisions. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Upon we come back, I'll let you know who he is, and then we'll go to discussions. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm glad to have you back on AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. My name is Ajiman Otradako, and our guest for today's episode is our very own Dr. Walter Allen from the University of California. Doc, you're welcome to AAU Talks.
Thank you, sir. Very pleased to join you in the audience here from University of California, Los Angeles.
Splendid. So we're looking at data-driven decision making. Though data as a very rare commodity, is quite rare because it's very important, you don't get it easily, has not really been given that platform for discussion in our part of the world, because most of the things that we do here is just by chance and by mere conjecture backed by political gimmicks and all that. We don't really have time to plan and then be deliberate about having enough data, harvested data, assessing it, analyzing it, and then be led to make a move by it. But you've been in a position whereby you've seen data being transcended into activities that has brought development, prosperity, and justice. Share with us how significant it is to foster it is data-driven analysis and how it's fostering development from your perspective.
Data-driven decision-making is at the center of development. It is a vital activity, and it is an activity that Africa, the African diaspora, has to be more actively engaged with and have greater access. Otherwise, we are not on the stage. We are not in the room on the stage when those conversations are being had about what to do next. We're not in the room, and so we have to be able to generate our data, manage, analyze our data, and add our voices to conversations about where the future goes. And most importantly, it becomes a form of self-determination, if you will. If we are not able to analyze data and then reach informed conclusions, then we are lost, and our opportunities will be lost.
You know, what one can really posit in this stead that what are some of the challenges and benefits which are there to gain if we are led by data-driven decision making, particularly solely in development? What do we stand to gain?
We stand to gain so much. We need to be reminded first and foremost that the human instinct is to gather information and use that information to make wise decisions. It's been amplified. That process has been amplified just by virtue of the sheer volume of data that is out there now. And so thus it becomes more tied to technology, digitalization. And so we have to develop our expertise, our opportunities in that area. And the benefits will be vast. It just simply becomes a version of what I referred to in terms of an individual who, without information, is wandering around making hit and miss decisions. You take that to the level of a society or community. That community to the extent it is able to marshal and aggregate all of its information and lessons, and then use those in a wise fashion to make the choices, then it has benefits for the current level of life and access, and also in terms of development and future opportunity.
You are with the diaspora, and you kind of hear what's happening in our parts of the world, our policies. Can you say confidently that the nature or the effectiveness of our policies, irrespective of whatever they are made from, and how how ineffective they may be, is as a result of the deficiency of data-driven impact? Can you make that assessment based on what you know?
I would be reluctant to make the assessment because I have not marshaled all the data. And one lesson we have learned is that you work hand in hand with the local actors, because at the end of the day, they are most informed about what's happening in that setting. But what I can and what we can't do help to provide is the technology, is the mechanisms, is the expertise to marshal the data that are available to make the kinds of assessments that you are referring to. I think one of the challenges historically has been that quote unquote outsiders simply assume that they know what is best for Africa, for those of us in the diaspora. And my approach is that you simply ask, what is it that you're trying to achieve? We then do an assessment of the resources and the content that are available, and then hand in hand working with those individuals, advise, help them to do the analysis and reach the decisions that will maximize their use of available resources in pursuit of the goals they've set for themselves. So that's a long answer, but my bottom line is that I would have to answer that question after I have the data to drive the decision. And I don't have the data.
You know, another dimension to data-driven decision making is ethics. Today, the conversation about data ethics is all over the place, and because now once data is being protected, others have been abused and then hacked and all that. What are some of the very critical data ethical considerations that we have to consider in ensuring that we apply data appropriately to the right accounts? What should we consider?
That is such a perceptive question, because the fact of the matter is that once these data are produced, they don't go away. They're out there forever. And so with that in mind, it becomes so important that the people about whom the data are being produced have a voice in what is going to happen with those data, that they have knowledge about which data have been collected and who is using them. And this comes back to our long struggle as a people and around issues of self-determination. Being able to have a voice in and influence what happens to us, what happens to things that are produced from us and by us. Data being one, but of course, natural resources being yet another, and so on and so forth. So it's just so vital and so critically important that we recognize that the ethics that you refer to are rooted in knowledge about what's going on with the data that are collected about you and who's collecting these data and to what purpose. And so to the extent we have a voice in that, then we can ethically protect ourselves and protect others and make sure that data are used for positive purposes and for purposes that are beneficial rather than destructive for us.
One of the very, I would say, disturbing factors within the African context is the issue of justice, social justice, and inequality. And one is wondering, how does data-driven decision making make an impact in streamlining social justice and equality? How does this work together?
It works. It is at the central. It is at the center of efforts to achieve social justice and equity.
Mm.
Um, to begin, one has to have an assessment, a map, a summary of what are the relative circumstances of people at different places in the society. So, in other words, we just have to have the information and the knowledge. And then compiling that knowledge, we can identify those places where social justice, equity lag. We can also identify the places where and examples where you are seeing greater progress towards social justice and equity. And having identified those situations, that is, having gathered the information to assess the situation, one can then evaluate those findings relative to the goals that the society, that those communities are setting for themselves. And you have a benchmark and a check. It's like with your car and gasoline. You know when you have a full tank of petrol,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep looking at the gauge, and you know when the petrol is 3/4, it's down to a
Yes,
quarter, you're
yes,
empty. If you
yes.
don't have that gauge, you're uncertain,
Mm-hmm.
and you won't be as efficient in trying to achieve the goal of getting to where you're trying to go.
And that is a very, very wonderful example, using the gauge. Well, people you use our gauge to tell that I can't make it there. I should get a fill my gas, refuel, because I think that what I have on my gauge, I can't make it to my destination. And that is a very great example. How do you think African governments can leverage on data to improve social, economic development and social lives of people in Africa? How can data really make a difference in such an activity?
I'm sorry for interrupting. I
Yeah,
think in two ways. On one level, just simply, it's all about human capacity and the training that the population has received in the technical aspects of data collection, data management, and analysis, and then decision making. So building that capacity is critical. What I emphasize is, first of all, recognizing that there is a capacity of some level already in place. So you maximize that capacity. And specifically, if that capacity weren't there, then we would not have, for example, Ghanaians in the highest universities in Britain and in the US who have those skills. And so the question becomes one of, then how do we maximize the capacity of those individuals, if not reversing brain drain, then absolutely creating pathways so that from those perches at those universities with all the resources, those Africans, we in the African diaspora can share that knowledge and expertise back to Ghana, back to Ethiopia, back to Rwanda. So that's the one thing. But an even more promising avenue is developing the capacity of those young people. Africa is the youngest continent in the world. And so we have all of this rich potential and possibility in our youth. So we must make sure that they are trained, that they are exposed, that their capacity in this digital age is expanded, and with a clear benefit to our advance. I mean, honestly, we look at China. I am an older guy,
Mhm.
not as old as you, but I'm an older man. And, and I remember when China was at the very bottom,
Yeah,
was at
yeah,
the very bottom of the world.
yeah.
And China invested in, developed their human capacity, got some self-determination, because that's the other thing. You have to not only develop your resources and your capabilities, but have the ability to control them and to deploy them to your benefit rather than just developing them so others can benefit. So the point is that with that example, you invest in your youth, you invest in the future, and you get these amazing returns. I mean, China is nothing short of a miracle what's happened over my lifetime in terms of that society moving from, literally, in 1949 when I was born, it was at the very bottom of the heap, the very bottom of the heap.
Mhm.
It is now competing for world leadership. And that comes from developing internally and data-driven decision making, investing in the building up of the youth's capacity, their intellectual capacity, their technical capacity, and doing it in a way at the same time where they understand that they are part of a mission that benefits their nation, that benefits our diaspora, rather than simply saying that they are doing this so that someone else can reap.
So it's an amazing that's far talking to Dr. Walter. You know, you can feel that yes, he's really known his stuff about data and how it can transcend into all parts of your activity, it being social development, human capital development, and all that. And we'll talk more. I believe you have made some points. So just don't go anywhere. We'll make more points in the show because we come back. We'll talk more about how data can be used to also enhance policy making, backing policies by data for great results. We're right back for more. Stay with us. Glad to have you back again on AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa, and we're learning about data-driven decision making. I know that you have gathered some data. You do it every day in your personal life, but you don't know that it's actually you implementing data-driven decision making because its benefits are a lot. And we're doing more talks and more learning with Dr. Walter Allen about how we can implement data-driven decision making and how it can change our lives and also our economy. And Doc, now before we went, we're going to look at how are we able to enhance transparency in the dispensation of data analytics towards making that very important decision that would help us to achieve our goal, transparency.
Enhancing transparency is rooted in, first and foremost, an informed population. Just take the example of, if I'm the only one in the room who can read, then you must believe what I say about the book. But once everyone in the room can read, then there are different perspectives and different understandings of what's in the book. Yeah. So we must have a situation where you have broad familiarity and education of the population with the data. That's the first piece. The second piece becomes one of those data being produced and then made available so that independent assessments can be rendered of the data. It's not simply very tight-fisted where Dr. Allen says it's so-and-so, but you can't see his data. You must take his word. If the data are true, then I'm happy for you to look at them. I'm happy for your voice to say, yeah, this is correct, this is not correct. So the notion of just a broadly educated population that has knowledge, generally speaking, and then knowledge specifically around digitalization, around having the technical skills to assess data, and then just the transparency of when you do research and you're honest. The whole research model is that you report your findings. Some of them will be to your liking, others will not be to your liking. But you must report the findings. You cannot make up the facts, because then the whole process, if you make up facts, then no one can trust the process. And worse still, you cannot learn lessons that are important for making necessary changes and improvements in the process so that you can achieve your goals. So transparency becomes just critical, and it becomes dependent upon broader multiple sources of data. You cannot have the data only be concentrated, only be available to a small sector. Even if you trust that sector, what you trust more than that is the ability of a broader set of voices to look at the data and to make assessments, and then to move into conversations where we pursue the goals that we set for ourselves, and we pursue those with integrity. And then we will get the kinds of outcomes that we seek.
Great. And how can we effectively utilize data-driven decision making to address very trendy and I would say emerging issues like climate change and environmental sustainability? How can we work around this? It's actually drawing global attention, and we in Africa, we actually are in that global local effect. Basically, How do we position ourselves to act informed in this state?
By exactly doing what you are encouraging the audience to do, educating ourselves about the reality of climate change and gathering the data that are telling us that this is a pressing existential issue for the world, for Africa, for our communities, for our children, the next generation, and gathering that information and then doing the analysis that informs change. But there must, of course, be the commitment to change. And one of the devices for achieving that commitment to change is to have independent voices in the community and in the diaspora who look at the same data that, say, governments or corporations look at, but look at with their own best priorities in mind. But when the larger population looks at those data, there are multiple priorities driving, and the priorities of the majority. And so often those priorities are not in line with a corporate emphasis on profits first. If a community's voice is being heard, it's saying, yes, profit is good, it's important, but the quality of life and the long-term consequences have to be taken into account as well. So that is just a piece of the importance of having these data be available. If I have time, I'll just use one quick example. Work I've done in the tropical forests, in tropical rainforests in Cameroon, was looking at issues of climate change.
Yeah.
And the role of those forests as the lungs of the world.
Great.
And so a conservation scheme's put in place that benefits that larger goal, but at the same time is problematic in it that it does not take into account the needs of the adjacent local populations for those forests as sources of food and places where the ancestors are buried, and so on and so forth. And so that's why it's so critical that the voices of the local individuals be in that conversation as well. And to have full participation in the conversation, you must have access to the data. And then you must also have, I keep returning to this, self-determination. So that if a corporation decides that it's something in its best interest, but the community says it's not in their best interest, we must be able to assert ourselves and not simply be pawns in a long-term game that in the end result will create more problems for us than benefits.
One of the very strongest debates today is about how we can elevate and alleviate poverty amongst marginalized communities in Africa who are going through tough situations, bad livelihoods and all that. And governments are thinking, I mean, some have given up on how they could make this breakthrough for these communities. And we are looking at the very most, I'll call it the abstract goal, which is data in this case. How can data be that revolving element to transform and elevate marginalized communities to be independent, to be resourceful and transformative? How does data make a difference in this case?
Data makes a difference in the sense that those communities will have at their disposal some empirical, concrete indicators. First of all, their disadvantage and disenfranchisement, because one thing that happens in hierarchical systems is that there's always the denial by those at the top that things are so tough at the bottom, or that they're not tough simply because of a failing of those individuals to work harder. As we know, no one works harder than poor people. Poor people work harder than anyone else. That's one of the reasons so many folks work hard not to be poor, because you will end up with a better circumstance. And so with the data, you can disprove this notion that, well, the failure is entirely about those individuals and their failing. You can look at systems, you can look at blocked opportunities, and then by the same token, you can look at ways to improve access and opportunities by looking at groups that somehow have broken, say, the individuals who've broken the cycle of poverty. What are the components for breaking such cycles? So I'll kind of conclude with my concrete example from the United States and your diaspora, our diaspora here. Over 50 years, my research has been arguing that there is more than enough wealth to eliminate extreme poverty and disadvantage, to be sure that basics of human dignity are available. What is the problem is that there is unfair distribution and concentration of that wealth. Now, to say it is one thing, but to show it with numbers and empirically is something entirely different. And the fact of the matter is that we in the United States tomorrow, with a few policy changes and a few redistribution changes about who has wealth and where it concentrates, could eliminate a situation where me as an individual, I have so much money I can't spend it in 40 lifetimes. And then there's a child, there's an elder who is out on the street who does not have food for that particular day or shelter. That's not necessary. And when you look at the empirical arguments, you can make a very compelling case for disputing notions that, well, that's just the way of things. There's no way we can avoid it, etc. So for me, data, empirical research has been a tool, even a weapon in some cases, in the struggle for social justice and in the struggle for racial equity.
If you had a message to African countries, African researchers, African policymakers, and all the people at well positioned in the right places to make a difference about the need for carefully crafted, meticulously collected, transparent, credible data to make decision making, what would be that very word to them on how to hold on to data, harvest, nurture, and make a difference in their respective holds?
Man, you're giving a woman a tough question early in the morning. I would say to the best of my ability, the several lessons I would offer are the following. First of all, educate.
Yeah.
And I mean educate in a broad sense of the term, not only college, because we have all these needs for technical skills and worker skills and so on and so forth. So we must educate so that people in the trades, they have opportunities and pathways to trades and becoming electricians, plumbers. We need all of this work done. And then, of course, school teachers and college professors. But essentially trying to be sure that the base level of general education is lifted and that the opportunity is available to every child in the society. And for that matter, that continuing education is available to adults. So educate is one. The second is recognize the value of education and the value of data and facts and sharing those, and not be afraid of that. Not be afraid of it, because to be afraid of sharing data and information is to be afraid of the truth. And Dr. King pointed out that the moral arc of the universe is always towards justice. So if you simply are providing education and expanding opportunities, it will benefit us all in the long run. So that is one criteria. And then just specifically in terms of government and their data and information, just build up that component of the government, that those offices that gather data, that analyze those data, and that make sure the data are then available to the leaders in all sectors of society in a form where it's been digested and can then be understood and applied.
That's awesome. I think that makes it all in one package for every African stakeholder, government, policymaker, researcher, academic, students, whoever you are. I think that we have really lagged. We've really lagged when it comes to harnessing data and making it very functional to our daily activities. We haven't really done so much well to have enough data about ourselves and what we need and how to go about them. And this has been the account of some of the things that happens in our continent. And Dr. Walter Allen has made it very clear that we have to educate, and also build capacity on how we can harness more data because it's through this information that you can be able to make very informed decisions. And you can get this anywhere except from AAU Talks with Dr. Walter Allen. So, Doc, thank you so much for your time on AAU Talks. I know you want to visit one day. We hope to see you one day in person so you can touch base on so many hearts, even though they watch you, but they also want to hear more from you. Where can someone contact you if they want to link up with you?
I visited a year and I'm due back in December.
Great. So we're looking forward to see you.
Visit the continent. I visit Ghana. They have trouble getting me back home.
Splendid. So, I mean, we can't wait to see you back home, okay, to spend time with us and also educate, I mean, inspire and also inspire young people to a whole generation who believe in data and how we can transform societies with data. And that's where time affords us on AAU Talks. It's been a great time with Dr. Walter Allen, and we hope to experience you more doing greater things and also learn more from you and be, I mean, change makers within Africa, backed and inspired by your words of data literacy. Thank you so much, Doc. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
This was a pleasure.
And bye.